All right, Bruce. Yeah, I know that one verse it would be the verse that you would bring up. Well, the cessationists bring up, but look at that verse very carefully. It's clear what that verse is talking about. Number one, he's in the context of Paul is talking about the context of love. Love is the thing that's permanent. Love never ends, and he goes on and waxes eloquently upon love. But about the gifts, what he's saying, we prophesy in part because we know in part. We're only here and we receive what he gives us. And he says, where there is prophecy, that it'll end. Where there are tongues, it shall cease when the perfect comes. What's the perfect? The cessationists always argue that it's the canon of Scripture, which is the lamest argument I think I've ever heard. I heard that when I was younger. I knew that was ridiculous, and it is absolutely ridiculous. It does not mean the canon is completed, meaning the Bible being completed. It, it it's very clear that it's talking about Christ returning here on earth. When he returns, we don't need to have words of prophecy because he will be here conveying his thoughts and his words to us directly. We don't need the word of prophecy. That's when it will cease, clearly. So I do believe in the cessation of the gifts when he arrives, the gifts of prophecy and maybe speaking in tongues. I'm not sure exactly if that will cease when he returns, but it's going to be a whole different world with that. As for asking me to present an argument biblically on my side of the case, no. I'm serious, Bruce. Read all of Paul's letters. Read the Corinthian letters. Yes, there was abuses back then, and that's what cessationists like to point out. There are abuses of the gifts that Paul addresses. And Paul says, no, don't abuse the gifts. They're orderly and they are for right now. So yeah, just just know that you're like asking a group of people have never seen a Tasmanian devil, and so therefore Tasmanian devils don't exist. Well, that's kind of lame, especially when they're not looking for the Tasmanian devil. Yes, they've never seen him; they're far away. Same thing with the gifts of the Spirit. These men are wholly convinced that the gifts of the Spirit are not for today, and they refuse to ask for them. And when you refuse to ask for them, they are going to be far from you. God is not going to grant to you any kind of spiritual gift if you reject the gift. And these men are rejecting the gifts completely. And I've heard plenty of them. I heard John MacArthur, I heard Justin Peters, I've heard Phil Johnson, I've heard them all talk about this before, and they all talk about experience. They go back to experience rather than the Bible. They talk about, well, we haven't seen these gifts. All we've seen is quackery on TBN. Yeah, guys, because you're not seeking the gifts. That's why you haven't seen them. So that's a short little snippet. I just can't actually, I can't give a defense of my position without actually going through all of the scripture. And I mean all of the scripture, all of Paul's letters that talk about the gifts. So that's why I'm not going to give you one verse because I'd have to give you 50.